Oh, yeah, that'd be good. Okay, we are streaming live on Facebook now, so I'm just going I'm going to press record in just a second so that we can also share this a little bit later on YouTube. So, where are we? Record on this computer. Okay, yay! We are live. Welcome to 30 Plus and Fabulous, where we're all just so incredibly fabulous. Thanks heaps for coming and having a chat with us tonight. Elliot Ikilei. You can pronounce that better than I can. You've had a few more years of practice than I have. Elliot, we just wanted to get you on board tonight to just answer some questions for us, because we're running a bit of a political series in the group, I guess you'd call it. So every night at 7:30 in the group, we have a chat about things that are, relevant, obviously, which is politics at the moment. And we could see, or I could see that, the bigger groups like Labour and National, they get lots and lots of coverage, and they get lots of, you see them all the time. And I just felt like I wasn't getting the answers to my questions for the minority groups. I don't know if you call yourself a minority group, but it's just, it's just those ones that don't get their questions, aired as freely as the big parties. So could we have a chat? Is that okay?
Sounds good.
That's awesome. Okay, I think, I'm not sure about the audio. It sounds a little bit...
Just change here because my headphones have just come off. So I'm going to try to fix something around here.
Okay.
Let's see.
Oh, that sounds better.
Does it sound better or not the same?
No, that sounds good. That's good.
Oh,
okay, so let's just start. I've just got a few questions that I've written out myself, and then we'll have some questions hopefully from the group. But just for me, first of all, just tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you become involved with New Conservative?
Yep, so kia ora and kia ora koutou to everyone who's listening in. My name is Elliot Ikilei, and yes, I've probably spent about the last 20 years working with at-risk youth, and that's anywhere from high suicidal ideation, sexual abuse, child prostitution, and self-harm. And I've also been able to be part of more positive things, for example, resilience training, building programs for youth leadership. Great fun. I'll do it for the rest of my life. And I joined politics specifically because of the breakdown in the family unit that was contributing to an increase in my workload. And as we scratched the surface, then we discovered there was a whole bunch of other sicknesses that were going across our democracy, our sovereignty, and always affecting our families. So our policies are built from the front line. We are the front line. And that's probably why I put all my strength behind New Conservative.
So New Conservative, out of all the parties that you could have chosen to align yourself with, is that just a values and morals based thing for you, or how does that work?
Partly yes. So partly there is the sense, because they are very strong about strengthening families and ensuring the focus that families are going to keep the bonds that we have there strong, but also it's the other policies as well. So for example, democracy, sentencing, justice, all of those are built specifically from the front line. So it comes from people who are farmers and firearms owners and youth workers and prison officers. So it specifically comes from people from the front line. 70% of our people, for example, are small and medium business owners. So our policies around economics come from that angle. And it's interesting because if you look at the two most disconnected people groups in the entire country, those would be academics and politicians. And it's amazing because they are the ones who set the rules that we live by and under.
Yeah, so interesting. And yeah, I have actually sort of had a little look into New Conservative and have seen that actually quite a lot of your candidates, or probably all, aren't they, all, like you said, frontline workers. So they all have jobs. They're all on the front line with work. That's pretty, that gives you a pretty good solid basis for creating policies for New Zealand, hey?
We can argue policies, and that's the reason why.
Okay, so what would you say would be your standout policies, and what sets you apart from other political parties?
Probably the big thing that sets us apart is actually our strengthening families. So anything that comes to families is strengthening the very bonds that occurs. That's probably what really does set us apart. There are a few other elements, but we've become a lot more accompanied alongside. So we were the first ones to stand up for free speech when free speech was actually threatened. We were also the group who exposed certain things. So we exposed the UN Migration Compact. We exposed the gender ideology that is now in our schools. We exposed the new prison that is going into Clendon in South Auckland. So we also do happen to be the ones we've got friends. We've got friends because we're frontliners. We've got friends in all the front lines, and they tell us a lot of things. So we pick up the garbage, we open the doors, we drive people everywhere. We are the front line, and that's why we found out a lot about some of the devastating things that have been going on. So probably one of the big things as well is free speech and freedom. Now, we've been accompanied by parties like ACT, and I believe Advance or NZPB have come along as well. So we're no longer the only ones to speak about that, and that's actually pretty cool. But we are the first ones to sort of jump in on that stuff. So strengthening families, and then it would be more about freedom, democracy, sovereignty, and the Western culture ideals that made us a great nation.
Yeah. So where does New Conservatives see the country going on the track that it's currently heading? And if we made no changes, where does New Conservatives see this country heading with the current government?
So most politicians will say, "Oh, this election is the most important of generations," fluffing everything up. But this actual election really is the most important since 1852. So this goes beyond Shipley and Savage and Holyoake and Palmer and everyone. This goes back to the Constitution days. So the main reason is we're on the cusp of a ideological replacement, which is an area which we just really are quite worried about. Not worried, actually. This will turn us into something else. And you can see that by the changes in our very political system and our free speech laws, our democracy, also in terms of our removal of elements of science and scientific truth from our very schooling system, from the way in which we conduct business. So the area that we're in is probably a culmination of things that have been quiet for quite a while, but only in the past couple of years has it been brought up. Unfortunately, though, we are now at a cusp election, and I desperately hope that people understand how important this particular election is, because it's not just New Zealand-wide, it is actually culture-wide. So if you look, the US, Australia, Canada, most of Europe, United Kingdom, they've all been grappling with this, and on the whole, they have reacted well. So they've got so Donald Trump, whether you love him or hate him, he's been able to stop a lot of the progressive sort of enterprises going on. You had the Conservatives in Australia and also the UK were able to pull back a lot of the things that have gone on. So we're really hoping that New Zealanders also realise that we're on the cusp and that we need to change things so we can pull it back.
So, I've heard a lot of talk and I follow a lot of different parties and their policies, and I just, I'm really digging deep here because I feel the same, that I feel like it's a really important election. And I think it's really time to just dig into all of these different parties to find out where you align the best. With National and Labour, I guess the majority of people, I don't know whether you'd call us lazy voters, because we think, it's just Labour or National, and then whoever your electoral, candidate is. What, if people are not going to dig into these minorities and have a better look at them, what are they going to get? If they don't choose Labour, they're going to choose National. Are they going to get something similar? Are they birds of a feather?
Sorry, yes, it will be similar, just it'll be different speeds. So one thing about the New Zealand voter is one of the wonderful things about New Zealand is that we're isolated. So we haven't had the brutal wars. We haven't seen the children starving and dying on the streets. We haven't had, so we don't even understand. So when people discuss words like socialism, New Zealanders don't really know what that is. We have read it in history books. We learn it. We don't really understand what it is. Which is why so I was at Kelston last night at a public meeting, and a dude from Soviet Union was there, real thick accent, and I can't even repeat the accent actually, but he is absolutely fearful that Soviet Union is coming here. Wow, that's interesting. Even today I even talked to Epoch Times. But so essentially what you're talking about is that New Zealanders, it's not so much that we're ignorant, it's just that we are used to a life where we haven't had to worry about things. Not overly. Yeah. We expect that politicians are a bit dodgy, but ha ha ha, we'll mock them, and then things will carry on like normal.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this year will be incredibly different depending on what gets in. Labour are the worst. They by policy and procedure they are the worst. National, unfortunately, doesn't fix those things. They seem, if when they get in, they generally just go look at some economic policies, but they'll leave the social devastation that Labour has engaged in their wake. So they don't really care overly. And now, of course, you've got National who are engaging in much more higher level liberal areas, as well as left-wing economic policies. For example, the zero carbon bill. And so National will just get to Labour's position just a little bit slower than Labour.
Very interesting. So, and I listened to the leaders' debate last night, which was, I actually just really love those. I listened to the Trump one the other day, and I had to turn that off. It was just cringeworthy to listen to. But I listened to the leaders' debate, and after I went away and had a look at some of the comments, it sounds like people think that really it's that they kind of go from one. Whoever leads, the oppositions just will say, well, you did this in the last term and you wrecked that and we're going to fix it. And then when they get in, they go, well, you wrecked that and we're going to fix it. And it just feels like it's flip-flopping backwards and forwards between the main parties. What would happen if New Conservative did actually get in and have enough seats in there to make effective change? What do you see happening in there?
One of the big ones, of course, is that we don't flip-flop and we don't play games. So one of our strengths and weaknesses is that we're quite inflexible and we are predictable. We will tell you what we will do straight up, even now. So we don't play games. And maybe it's also because we come from the front line. Because you come from the front line, you've had to earn your right to have a reputation. So people have either said, yep, no worries, that guy's true to his word, that's why we employed him for 20 odd years, or vice versa. You've been in front line, you've just got to do your word. And that's a really big part. So when we say we're going to do something, we don't joke, we're not picky, we flip flop or anything like that. And that's a strength and a weakness. So, but probably what we would do first off is really seek to get the voice of the people back into Parliament. At the moment, one of our more boring but important policies is actually the binding citizens initiated referendum. That's when the citizens, if they get enough votes, if they get enough signatures on paper, they make a referendum, and then they can make it binding. Currently, if a citizen makes a referendum, it's not binding. So if you take the anti-smacking bill, for example, they said, I think it was over 90 or the low 90% said repeal the anti-smacking bill. But the government absolutely ignored it. In fact, they've ignored every single citizens initiated referendum that's ever existed. And it's incredible, because when you've got over 2/3 of the country and more in every single citizens initiated referendum, that's the voice of the people. Yeah. But the government just said, no, get stuffed. And that's an incredible ignorance of or ignoring of the people of New Zealand. So we act as the actual representatives of New Zealanders themselves. And so we seek to have our voice in there. We've got a whole bunch of policies, of course, but for myself, I think it's about getting the voice of the people back in there, and also being able to strengthen the political system itself.
I totally am with you on the whole democracy thing, and democracy is New Zealanders' voices taken to the government and the government listen to our voices, right? Why is that not happening?
Oh, that's a magic question right there. So if you have a look at, I will give one more example of something. So when the BCIR was first brought out, the first fight was to say, hey, why don't we just make it so that all referendums are binding? The argument came back saying, no, you don't have to worry about it, because no government would be stupid enough to ignore the voice of the people, which of course we've seen they have. Now that was in the 90s when that came out. If you look at the current one, the government, the politicians have started to muck around with the select committee. The select committee is the only place in any law being built where the people of New Zealand can have a say. Now, let's take the abortion bill, for example. The abortion bill was pushed through. Only 4% of New Zealanders were happy with the way in which the time frame worked, and they pushed it hard. Tens of thousands of submissions were written saying, please don't release this bill. It's really brutal. But if you have a look at what happened, a select committee can last from weeks to months. But for the select committee in the abortion bill, they gave 1 day in Auckland, only 1 day to hear submissions. And that was incredible considering the tens of thousands of submissions, one of the highest in the history of Parliament. And they just allowed for 1 day in Auckland. And it was just an incredible slice and dice of the democracy, of the people being able to have a voice. That's what we've seen more and more, firearms, and we see it's just continuing on. Now, as to the intentions why, that's a question we don't know. We don't know what their thought processes or decision-making processes are. What is concerning, however, is it's actually on both sides. So it is actually coming from Labour and National. That's what we saw. That's what we saw on the zero carbon bill, on the 17 laws that they all went through near the end of the lockdown, the abortion. So across the board, this is going on. Not sure why. What we do know is that we need to fix it before it's too late.
Yeah. And do you feel like, I mean, I think I know the answer to this anyway, but do you feel like if some other parties don't get in to try and, you know, create a bit of disturbance with these two current major leading governments, are we stuffed? Like, are we stuffed if it stays like this? Are we stuffed? Do we have, we don't, okay, yeah.
If you've got a current government who will get in, the promises that have been made are around free speech laws. They've been made around further links into Belt and Road initiatives. It's about changing the ramifications and dynamics of gender itself, the processes of removal of freedom of religion. So you're looking at some incredibly nearly surreal types of policies that will come in. I mean, it's surreal. I mean, I know it. I've researched it myself. I've been engaged in the politicians, and I still think, is this really happening? You know, it's really odd.
I know, I agree. I agree with the fact that things are happening at a really fast pace and things that we haven't seen, they're almost of biblical proportions. Maybe they are of biblical proportions. So, but I do also see, like from our conversations within the groups, that I don't know if so many people have dug in as deep and as, like, I guess if you dig a bit too deep, you get called a conspiracy theorist. But I know that there is some UN ideology being driven in, and that is what a lot of these things are to do with. But because there are probably not as many people who are digging into the UN ideology, can we just ask some of the brutal questions? And I know this is the bit that I warned you about. We're going to be a bit brutal tonight because, you know, the women want to know things. I've got some questions from the girls. Let's start with, is New Conservative homophobic?
Oh yeah. No, I get this one. A bit. I mean, no, but I'm just trying to wonder how to answer that beyond no.
Yeah. Should I ask then? Should I unpack it a little bit and ask what your stance is on things such as gay marriage?
We believe. Oh, I see. Ah, yes, of course. Right. So, because a lot of us are youth workers and we work in the field, what we have seen in the three main longitudinal studies, that's the studies that go over 70 odd years and they measure it every 7 or 10 years. What we've seen that the best type of family situation for a young person to grow up in, to be more mentally resilient, able to do good things and to be less likely to kill themselves and kill other people, is within a married mum and dad home. So it's a married mum and dad home, which is actually the best style of family, statistically speaking, to raise a young child who's going to be all of the positive, or generally all of the positives. I grew up in multiple broken homes, so I love both my parents, but I do acknowledge from the scientific literature and from 20 years of being in the field that in actual fact it's not the best home. The best home is a married mum and dad home. That is the best sort of way. So it's more that we say, right, if you really say the best form of marriage is the propagation of the next generation. The best form of that is a married mum and dad. And so we say that is the exclusionary, at the exclusion of any and every other form. That's solo parents, solo families. Solo parent families are not the best type of family. Neither is thruples or groups or polyamorous or homosexual or whatever it is. The best form is married mum and dad. And so I think probably you'll find that some of the rainbow community jumped on it and said, hey, that means you don't like gay people. Like, no. And then when they ask us, oh, so even today, I think it was today, the AM show asked our leader, Leighton Baker, straight out, said, hey, are you going to repeal gay marriage? And Leighton said, no, no, we're not.
That's a good question.
And
You're
then
not going to repeal it. Yeah.
and half an hour later, Amanda Gillies was on the radio again, on the TV again, saying New Conservatives will repeal the gay marriage law. So I was like, dude, what? We just told you.
I
So,
know.
no. We will, however, and this is actually, we will, however, remove the gender ideology that has now pushed into schools. And as of 2.5 weeks ago, Tracy Martin has now advised that Ministry of Education are now pushing into all of the state and state integrated schools the embedment of gender ideology, a pure form of gender ideology in the schools. Now, we are absolutely opposed to that because that is a psychological condition. Those children who do suffer from gender identity disorder / dysphoria, they need counseling, they need looking after, they need to be treated with compassion and tolerance. But what we don't do is spread that out to the rest of the children to be pushed 5, 6-year-olds to be learning that there is somehow this weird difference between gender and sex, because it's not scientific, and it psychologically damages our children, doesn't actually help them. So we say, no. If a child wishes to be transgender or anything like that, wait until they're adults, wait until they're 18 years old. Go hard at that stage, no problem. But while they're children, leave them alone. Let them learn about English and science and playing games and teddy bears and chasing each other around. That's fine.
So one of the arguments about that particular topic in the group when we talked about New Conservatives policies was that, get with the times, New Conservative. We've gone through the times already where kids have had to hide their sexual identity and have gotten depressed and have ended up with mental health problems. And a lot of the argument was about the fact that if you don't allow this teaching to happen in schools, then these kids are confused and, they're going to end up with depression and be suicidal and all that sort of thing. What's your answer to that? Is it just literally what you just answered?
Yeah, so what you'll find in the United Kingdom, for example, they've had this sort of quote unquote education, which I would say is more like inculcation to their children for about 12 years, I think it is now. And now just recently they've had to put a task force together because they've realized that they don't know why something like over 4,000% increase of children as young as 4 are now seeking gender therapies since 10 years ago. So what we've found is that the pushing of the psychological condition of gender identity disorder, dysphoria, onto children does actually become a social contagion. In the same way that sometimes you can make self-harming look cool, in the same way now you can have the gender identity disorders come through as well. So when they talk about education, they're not actually talking about education. Because when you've got a 7-year-old child, now I'm talking, one of the links for the new purer form of gender ideology is that 7-year-old children are to be able to identify the difference between gender and sex, and then also speak about different sexual orientations. Now, a 7-year-old shouldn't have to worry about that or think about that at all. Yet now we have that being coursed through not only high school as it was previously, but now it's going through our children. It is a disgraceful thing. And not only that, it actually comes very clearly from a place called UNESCO. UNESCO is the United Nations Education for Children, and they are seeking to also engage in things, and I'll use the one that I usually go to, which is how to have a healthy discussion about 4-year-old children masturbating in front of each other. Now, I don't care about the ideas that, oh my gosh, these guys are backwards as, they got no idea. Get stuffed. If you've got people who think that it's okay for children to be masturbating in front of each other and to do so in a certain way, that's wrong. That's wrong. And for 7-year-olds to be told, no, you need to talk about different gender identities and orientation, that's 7 years old, that's wrong. What they need to be doing is to be left alone, to be playing games, to be engaging in healthy developmental areas, and especially not talking about something which is not scientific by any means, and has actually been shown, overseas data clearly shows, to encourage mental illness and encourage mental dysphoria. And so when we do look at, now I've worked with about 30, I think it's 34, I think we remembered counting up. I've worked with about 34 trans kids in my lifetime, in my career, sorry. And I love every one of those kids. They're awesome. They know exactly how I feel about the idea that, no, you're a male and you are having a particular dysphoria about your body. Yet they still come to me and they'll still discuss and talk about some of the pain and struggle in their lives. And that's absolutely fine. I love that. But what we don't do is go to children, primary school children, and push this on them. It makes no sense whatsoever. And when you have a clear, if you have a clear origin coming from a place that doesn't know what it's talking about, it's dangerous. And it's been shown to be dangerous as well.
So I, during the lockdown, I think this is probably where everyone started digging a bit deep because we were kind of all a bit stuck, weren't we? So I actually did read that documentation about the childhood masturbation, all that sort of thing, and they were driving it into daycares. Is that in New Zealand now?
Not that particular lesson, but the organisation is in New Zealand now. So the organisation is utilised as part of the formation of how the Ministry of Education have pulled together. Quite often, Ministry of Education, they won't really do their own stuff. They'll pull in other groups and they'll sort of attach it and then they'll put it through. And that's why you'll come across more high-level sexualized behaviours and also scenario pieces. For example, Family Planning put out a booklet. That booklet was used for school exercises, and that was for 13-year-olds. We got this confirmed from 3 weeks ago that 13-year-olds were being told about a highly sexualized scenario, and that was from Family Planning. So these are happening in our schools right now, and it's devastating.
Yeah, well, actually one of the ladies in the group I can't remember the name of who put this up, but she actually put up at one of those exact scenarios that her child had to do at school, high school, or I don't know whether it was intermediate or high school. I think it was high school, but it was, talking about the scenarios of all those different sexual things. And she was like, is this okay? Like, is this what my kids are seeing? And I think we've got sort of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other where it comes to people's opinions on all this. Some are saying, oh, look, it's time for change. The world is changing. Kids, they need to get with the program. Everyone needs to get with the program. And then there's the other half saying, get that away from my kids. They don't need to see that stuff. I think there's still a struggle. I think we're still having a struggle deciding what's right and what's wrong. And because, like we said, times are changing, where do we draw the line?
I think let's take the recent Netflix controversy, the Cuties program, where it showed a girl, where it showed 11-year-old children really behaving really sexually, engaging in humping the floor, showing their breasts, trying to seduce very much older men, and that was quite disgusting as well. Really difficult to watch, and so you've got to, because the thing is, a lot of the people who are saying, wrong side of history, the usual tropes, what you've got is a situation where, in a sense, and I hate saying it in this way, but where you've got adults who've actually been groomed to actually accept the sexualization of our children. Because a 6-year-old child and a 7-year-old child should not be thinking about sexual things, whether this is 2020, 2050, 1980, 1300, or whatever. It's the psychological and the neurological development of a child cannot actually process these things in a proper way, and it doesn't matter what stage of history we're at. So I would say that those people who are there, they have actually been, and I understand the usage of the wording, but they are being groomed in a sense to accept that sexualization of children is actually okay, and it's really not.
Yeah. I definitely have to agree on that one. I do not like the sexualization of children at all. Okay, let's I'm just going to ask you what okay, let's talk about the racism topic. So I heard quite a bit.
Racist, Natalia.
Yes, I heard that you're very racist. So this is an interesting one because it's all revolved around the treaty and the documents and all that sort of thing. But can you just explain it to us? Because I even had people in my own personal life who I was like, oh, wow, they suddenly went very anti-new conservative. And these were people who I thought were quite conservative. So, and they said, well, look, at the end of the day, we can't align with them. They're racist. So unpack that for us.
Oh, I love that one. Yeah. No, I've heard that one. Actually, the big thing came up when the spin-off, and I think they call it New Zealand policy website or something like that, and it's from the spin-off. And so, man, I had one of the spin-off guys call me and take me through it, and I was like, oh, Mark, is that our policies? So one of the ones is, so we say, as far as I'm concerned, so the treaty policy was fought for mostly by the two Māori on the board. That would be me and the other Māori. Interestingly enough, the Pākehā on the board, they wanted to make it a little bit more palatable or more politically correct. And myself and the other one, both of us work Southside. We've worked years in the field of at-risk people. She spent years working with sexual abuse victims, senior detective, and all of that. But we said, no. We want the treaty like this. This is how we want it. So that was quite interesting that the only two people who wanted it in its entirety was the two Māori. She was Ngā Puhi, I'm Te Atawa Ngā Te Raukawa. So the way it works is this. There are 3 articles of the treaty. The first article is the cost, kawanatanga, tino rangatiratanga. Second article is the nuance, what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours, and together we can trade, and if the government wants to buy and sell to the government, sweet, no worries. The third article is my favorite one. That's the one that says that all people of New Zealand will be given the same rights and privileges as those of the British Empire. And that's gorgeous. Now, one of the big things as well is that in the days leading up to the signing of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, it was transcribed and put into the database, and that's at Victoria University. And 20 years later, it was also brought up again, big Kohe Marama conference, so they discussed it. And at that time, no problem. You had some contractual breaches on both sides of the contract, but overall, it went really well. Great ideas around equality and bringing things up. You had some had a fight, and then some of the governments were dicks, and they stole land. And so those days went on. It is a contract. That's what the Treaty of Waitangi is. It is a contract. And so we come out to now. Here's a good one for you. So for many years it was fine. Where I come into play is that the family, the whānau. Now here's a stat for you. If you were born as a Māori in the 1970s, you had an 80% chance of being born into a married mum and dad home. 80%. As of right now, what do you think the percentage is? So if in the 70s, 80% chance being born into a married mum and dad home, what do you think the percentage is right now?
I wouldn't have a clue, but I think that it's more usual to have a broken family than a together family in any culture at the moment.
Oddly enough, it's not. Asians, almost 100% fine. English, Caucasian, Palangi, whatever you want to call it, usually pretty high 70s or something like that.
Wow.
Pacifica, not too bad in the 80s. Māori, but in terms of unmarried homes or ones that break up quite quickly, 20%. So it went from 80% in the 70s to 20% right now. So when people say, oh man, it's racism, it's against the Treaty of Waitangi, that's why there's 51, 52% Māori in prisons. No, it's not. It's nothing to do with racism or the whakapapa, the colour of your skin, or your education level or income level. No, it's not. If you want to have a look, it's family breakdown. So, getting back to the Treaty of Waitangi, what we saw is that benefits in the 70s started to get targeted, made easier for Māori, and then that's actually what destroyed our families mostly. Wasn't alcohol or drugs, wasn't colonialism, wasn't war or the urbanization of Māori. It was very specifically, it had to do with the benefit system, the targeting and increase in that, and the increase in affirmative action policies. Myself and the other Māori who were on the board, we hate affirmative action policies and the benefits. The reason why, and this is where it gets attached to the treaty, the reason why is as soon as you give a group more power, more benefits, more privilege, more powers under the law, that what you've actually done is you've taken away our ability to be resilient, to be stronger, to be more innovative, to be more creative, to be more steadfast in our ways, to go hungry one day so that we can keep our eyes clear and ready for the next opportunity. And what the treaty, or not the treaty, but what has been reacted to the treaty since the late 70s, early 80s, is an absolute racial segregation and racial segregation by power and privilege by politicians and academics who've got no idea about how much it hurts us as Māori. They've got no idea, and so that's what happened. My favorite intellectual is Thomas Sowell, and he said that the black family has survived centuries of slavery, generations of Jim Crow, but has disintegrated in the wake of the liberals' expansion of the welfare state.
Wow.
You want to help us, stop treating us like we're incompetent and weak. And when you look at the Treaty of Waitangi, it was a powerful document that enabled so many of our people to gain the new benefits of the economic world. We say, yep, fix the Article 2 breaches, fix them, resolve them, put a deadline there, but fix them, no problem. We say then that slash everything else that tries to make us racially segregated from the rest of the New Zealanders. We don't want it, and it actually damages us. It doesn't do anything. So get rid of Māori seats, get rid of co-governance structures, get rid of anything that changes, that separates us from the rest of New Zealand. Get rid of it, because it doesn't help. And back to the Article 3.
So effectively, they're calling you racist because you're saying get rid of those prop-ups, get rid of the prop-ups, get rid of the pedestals, get rid of the things that give them what you're calling it is segregation. So, but it's getting flipped on you. They're saying you're a racist, and you're saying we need to be equal, so that we're all trying to drive and trying to achieve and try, like you said, resilience, and we're all trying at the same level. But why did they initially have those prop-ups for just that culture? Why did they?
There were some good ones. So, for example, the Māori seats. When the Māori seats were first raised as an important one, the question, the issue was that Māori were democratically disabled. Now, I say disabled because what I mean by that is that that when the English had the voting style brought in, basically you had to own land, you had to be 21, and you had to be male. So sorry, Natalia. So what you had is that those were the cases. It wasn't a race-based law; it was a class-based law, and that was the issue in that. Now, most Māori didn't have it. It has to keep in mind, however, that there was about 100 Māori who were actually enrolled to vote, so they could actually vote. But what happened was the politicians got together and said, right, we need Māori to be involved. How do we get them involved democratically? Because this was the idea, to join it up, the treaty. So what they came up with was, all right, let's get some Māori seats together, and it doesn't matter if you have land or don't have land, you've got this. And so they came up with the Māori seats. It was only supposed to be for 5 years. I think 5 years was going to be too short anyway. But what happened is, as soon as it became universally applied, so as soon as New Zealand went to a state where, hey man, it doesn't matter whether you own land or don't own land, you should be able to vote. As soon as that happened, the Māori seats needed to have been taken away, because it's just like when you damage your leg and you've got a walking brace on. Great, no problem. You need that walking brace to help you walk, have a semblance of walking. As soon as you become healed up, and as soon as Māori lost that democratic disability, then the brace needed to come off so that they could engage in the adversarial combat that is politics. Māori were awesome. If you look at the kaupapa and the tikanga of various areas, there was always the adversarial style of humanity. And that's what was so awesome. But by keeping it there, what it does is it increases resentment against everyone. It puts a chip on the shoulder of some Māori, and it just damages everyone. It doesn't actually help. I'll tell you this, however, in terms of Māori, if you look at the income levels on average of Māori groups, it's not New Zealand where they succeed the most. The place they succeed the most is actually Australia. And there's no treaty there, no affirmative action policies, no benefits that target them there. They have to work, or they don't eat. And what happens to Māori, powerful over in the mines, over in the Gold Coast, they are excelling and going so strong and wonderful. And that's the thing. Humanity is adversarial. Don't weaken us by giving us all of these extra privileges and powers, because it doesn't make us stronger or equitable. It actually continues to disempower us and make us less able to handle the future.
Yeah, well, that's a very different spin on what I've heard about your ideas about. Do you know? I'm not sure if you do, but because they're flourishing on the Gold Coast, and I've seen that as well. Do you know if there's statistics around their families staying together?
Oh, good question. I tried looking, but I couldn't find because when they came to the numbers, they would give the numbers for Australian citizens, but they didn't do it for New Zealand families living in Australia.
Oh,
So I wasn't able to find those. But in general, outside of that, anecdotally, from comments that I've heard from my family and friends over there, there's a general sense that they stay together better than over here.
Yeah, I must say, like, I've got family living in Australia, and I'm, obviously here in New Zealand. I've single parented for as long as I can remember now. And I look at my sister, and she's had single parenting times in her life. And she could always take her kids to the movies. They always had nice clothes. They always drove a nice car. All that sort of thing. And me, I just would look at it like, oh, it wasn't depressing. I was happy for her, but it wasn't the same here. We didn't have the same support for our families here. And also here, I remember talking to Inland Revenue and saying, so you mean to tell me I'm going to be better off financially if I stay away from my partner and don't try and make it, don't try and get back together with my children's father. I'm going to be better off financially. We both will be, because they support you to be a broken family, but they don't support you to be a together family. So is that something that Australia's just doing better than New Zealand then? They must be.
Oh, partially, but it's also because of their economy. I mean, we know that they're the lucky country, but what they do have is they've made it so that you've got a lot more opportunities for work over there. Yeah. And one of the greatest things about families is if there's a job going and you're not stuck onto the benefit, it gives you all types of self-confidence, the ability to choose what you want to do, the moving around, the adventurousness of it, the excitement of that, the fact that if you've got a job and your child is starting to run amok at school, you're a lot more fierce on them than if you had a benefit. In fact, one of the first things I generally try to do if there's a young person starting to run amok is I look at the parents and I say, right, first off, let's find out, do they have a job? Because if they do have a job, then what they're saying is, hey, boy, you're mucking around at school, that's my food you're eating. That's my school that I'm paying those fees. Those are my money going to those fees. When it's a benefit system, it changes the whole dynamic, and that's what really is damaging. And like Thomas Sowell said, that the families disintegrate when it becomes a welfare state.
But it's it is a kind of a tricky one, because these welfares, or this welfare system is needed sometimes. A lot of times there are some desperate situations where literally it's just a hand-to-mouth situation. So how do you differentiate? How do you say, right, we don't believe or want a welfare state, so how do you undo that?
And that's the wonderful thing. So what you need to do is you have to look at CPI index and also CP index and things like that, because and you're absolutely right. What we have in New Zealand, unfortunately, is a growing welfare state. Even the working for families, that is a benefit, and it's painful to think about it in this way, because it's a gold hook. It's not like alcohol and drugs. When you take alcohol and drugs, okay, well, I'm getting smashed, I'm feeling good, but I know it's bad. I know it's bad. Benefits are a little bit different, because benefits are taking away your resilience, tenacity, strengthening, innovation, and the ability to handle things and go forward. But I also put milk in the baby's bottle, gas in the car, money on the hop card. I was able to get over here and get over there. That's where social welfare is actually a gold hook. It looks good on the surface. What we need to do is go back to the area where we've made sure that things were just barely looked after, but that was still quite uncomfortable, because what we have nowadays is actually, so some of my ex-students told me exactly what they can get, and they know better than I do as to what they are able to get and how many babies and where they can live and how they can work it through. In fact, I also worked at the warehouse at Manukau, or I worked subcontracting to them looking after young people. And what you'll find is that that some of the customers go off to and say, hey man, I need stuff. So they'll just give them a taxpayer funded check. They will go to warehouse and they will fill up their trolley, their PlayStation, music, phones, microwave, and then they'll just, and it's taxpayer funded. And so you lose the very sense of respect for any item or anything that you're engaging in. And so you're absolutely right. We must have that social welfare system. And I think that's a beautiful part of Western society. The fact that we will look after you if you fall over, get sick, someone dies. But the idea is to not allow it become this hook that becomes dependent on you. It becomes like heroin. If
Yeah.
anything, gosh, it should be more like a little bit of a swig of a vodka or something like that, just to get you through, as
Yeah.
opposed to a heroin needle, which is what is becoming more and more.
I guess it's just hard to know. I mean, that would just be a really tricky thing to try and transition. I mean, there would be a lot of work involved with knowing who was ready to be merged onto another situation. But let's just talk quickly, because that's a big, huge subject. Let's just talk quickly. Some of the ladies were asking about that solo mum thing. They were quite pissed off, actually. They said,
Is that the Handmaid's Tale policy?
This I don't know what the policy is called. I just know that we're not living with any old women in any village of old people looking after us. We don't need to be looked after. So I know definitely myself, because I've actually read through a little bit more and seen that it wasn't exactly like that. But just to explain.
Yeah, so I started. So when we got attacked for it, I started calling it the Handmaid's Tale policy. So, but effectively, it's a. So we made our social welfare position on social welfare, hand up, not a handout, all that sort of stuff. And we gave an example of a social welfare policy that we would give on offer if so desired. And so we had this idea of, and we worked with those who are on the field again about it. And the idea was to open this as a opportunity if you've got a solo mum who wants it. So first and foremost, it's essentially incredibly, so you've got to be able to, you got to want it.
Yeah.
But in order to access it, you need to have two elements. One, you've got to be able to show that the man there's no father of the baby, whether he's a coward, whether he's passed away, whether he's in prison, whatever, that he's gone. The second thing is that you've got to have no family support whatsoever, none. And if those two criteria can be gained, then if you would like to take on this opportunity, sweet, we will make sure that it's open to you. And the idea is that, so for those solo mums who've just got no support and they want to have a help for it, they go to this area. It's like Monte Cecilia Mangere, where it's like you got different rooms, communal kitchens and things like that. And within there, then they look after them, and baby will stay in that place for between 6 and 12 months. And what will happen at that point is then you've got a trained couple, and they assist with soothing techniques, how to help with baby feeding, all the elements that those of us who are parents already know about now. And so they fulfill that sort of gap. And we also have no stayovers. Now, the issues that we got attacked on was compulsory. No. Totally voluntary. If you don't take it, no problem. Don't take it. It is not compulsory. Yeah. Second thing was couples. The issue with couples. Couples is actually, for those of us who are in the field, couples are as per normal practice. Whenever you've got a youth intervention place or a hostel situation or a homeless sort of regard, almost all the time it's run by a trained couple. There are reasons as to why. Accountability, safety, synergy from the biological sexes, and a couple of other things. But it's not contentious in the field. It's a usual thing. We just always expect that. The other one was stayovers. People said, "Oh my gosh, well, you can't have stayovers." No, you cannot have stayovers. Even if it's a good brother, the mum's in there and the brother does come along out of anywhere and says, "Oh, look, I'll stay with you." No. Reason being is what we do know from statistics and from the frontline experience is that as soon as you get any stayover, the risk to baby and then to mother becomes exponentially high. It exponentiates in its risk factor. The other one is you've got to consider the fear, anxiety, and the risk to other women, mothers in the place as well. And so you might have the most beautiful brother in the world who's coming to stay, but then that doesn't help if you've got sexually raped or sexually abused other mothers in the other areas. So we made a blanket rule saying no stayovers. Yep, look at us as meanies and all that sort of stuff. We don't care. The idea is to make sure that mum and baby are in the safest environment possible to be equipped with the best way that they can be equipped.
So let's just so you said it's like a 6 month or a 6 to 12 month gig?
6 to 12 months, because at the moment you've got elements, so team parenting units and longer term stays, but they are usually about 3-4 weeks. and it's not really sustainable if you want to help someone learn how to properly and sustainably handle, become resilient, and learn how to, in a longer way, bond with baby, and in a longer way, look after yourself as well.
Yeah, and so it's only for mums with little wee babies, just like little babies, or is it for children, other children as well? Is it mums with more than a couple of kids, or?
Well, the idea of it was to be newborn, but if you've got a mum who's got other kids as well, that would have to go with it. I do have to point out that it really was, we were quite specific with the criteria.
Yeah.
You've got to make sure, or you've got to be able to say that the dad is a coward, or he's passed away, or something like that, and that no family wants you, that you've got no family. If that's the case, yes, yeah, we would look at that sort of scenario where you've got to have other kids and be looked after in that regard.
Yeah. So it's not compulsory. You can have it's an option if you want it, and if you don't want it, all good. It's just to help you get back on your feet. Is it, or is the male solo dad in that criteria?
The numbers, if you have a look at the numbers, solo parent homes, 85% of solo parent homes currently are by mums. So mums are doing a massive load on it. You have to think then that even within that, many of them are supported. Sometimes not really well supported, but there's still some form of support. So when we worked out the figures of that, that women actually were a fraction of that 85% of solo parent homes. Then we worked out that solo fathers of newborn babies would be an incredibly infinitesimal amount of that. So the numbers just didn't stack up. But that said, if there was a case for numbers, it's easy enough to make it for men as well. It's just the numbers didn't add up, that's all.
Yeah, okay, got you. Right, so I'm just going to ask a question from the group. We've got Emma asks, let me just have a read under the welfare policy they provide provisions. Oh no, we just asked that one about single fathers. Eloise would like to know, where do you...
I was by my solo dad too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm one of the 15%.
Oh. So Eloise would like to know where you currently stand on the no jab, no pay or play type policies for private companies.
So we believe very much that parents should have the right to say what goes in their child's body. We absolutely believe that they also need to be, not just in terms of vaccinations, but also abortions, as well as anything else. What goes into a child's body must be up to the right of the parent, not the state. We are absolutely opposed to that. When it came to private companies, we actually understand why a private company might say, no, we only want people who've got up-to-date vaccination records. It's a private sector, so we accept that. We're not big fans of it, but we accept it. In terms of the public sector, that's complicated. We're not sure. We haven't actually had a big fight about that one. We haven't discussed that as a board. We have vaxxers and anti-vaxxers on our board. So it's always been sort of like one of those things that we want to discuss, but we just haven't gotten to discussing it yet.
Just a bit
the first and foremost one is we're absolutely, totally 100% opposed to mandatory vaccinations. It's wrong, even at a human level, even at an ideological level. It's absolutely wrong. It strikes me as amazing that we do have a growing amount of politicians who say that it should be fine, but it's not fine. Yeah.
Well, you know, we had that conversation with Dr. Simon Thornley, who said that vaccinations take a good number of years to be safe, to be considered safe. So it's a bit freaky thinking that in a year or 2 years, you might, there might be one scenario that you've got the option to take it, and most healthy people might say, oh no, I'm good, I'm healthy, I'll take the risk. But if it becomes mandatory, and these are not safe vaccinations, then what? Who's accountable? What happens then?
Well said. And it gets deeper. If it's a mandatory vaccination for a fear-mongered illness that actually affects us in a very similar way to just a reasonably severe flu, what's to say that vaccination won't occur in different areas or even medical procedures? That's one of the ways. That's why we were quite shocked when we found that the amendment in the Section 11 powers to the COVID response bill changed from forcing people to undergo diagnostic testing, and it got changed into people must now undergo medical treatments for the cessation or reduction of COVID issues.
Which literally translated means that if they decide that they're going to inject us, they have the right to do that.
And more concerning, is while we're hard at work, they can get them all jabbed, and we don't know until afterwards.
So can they, with that legislation, so that little bit of writing that's been changed, amended, does that mean that while you're at work, they could send in nurses or whatever doctors into the school and have your children vaccinated while you're at work?
Yes, that's right. That's what the power gives you.
And so is there any way for us to know that that's happening, or they just do that?
I don't know if they would or not, but the law doesn't necessitate that they communicate it to you.
That's kind of terrifying, actually. Oh,
incredibly.
very, very
I mean,
scary.
the COVID response transferred the amount of power that they transferred from just the power of New Zealand into so few politicians has not even been done in times of war. It's actually an unprecedented power transfer. That's how amazing it is.
I really, really hate that word, and if I never hear it again for the rest of my life, it wouldn't be a day too soon. Unprecedented is my most word. And the bubble, I hate that word as well. Bubble. They've just wrecked me. So okay, I really don't like the idea of that. Is this government, like I did hear, because I listen to all of the different parties, I like to try and educate myself and see what everybody's doing, and I did hear a live stream where Jacinda Ardern did say that they would never make vaccinations mandatory, but then I did read some more information that said it may not ever be mandatory, but you may be coerced by being ostracized from certain things by not being vaccinated. Is that a possibility? Can that happen?
Yes, and unfortunately both main parties, so I think Labour, National, ACT, ACT are a little bit worrying. ACT have suggested actually that it should be a straight mandatory. National and Labour tend to subscribe to making it not so much mandatory, but that you won't be able to go anywhere that they control unless baby is vaccinated or so it's like what they say about the UN. Hey, it's not legally binding. Yeah, no, it's not, because you've made it binding, not the UN. In this circumstance, you can say, right, well, it's not mandatory, but if you want anything at all, then you're going to have to get vaccinated.
Wow.
So that's where that sort of wordplay comes into it.
So just to be clear, New Conservative are not going to make vaccinations mandatory.
We will never make vaccinations mandatory. Parents must be first instead of the state.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, another question. Let's see. Can you tell us about the gender ideology being taught in schools that you've uncovered? Did we already cover that? That you've uncovered?
So I'll do a real quick one then. So we were able to expose the gender ideology in Mates and Dates. Basically, it's on the public surface. It says it's anti-bullying, anti-sexual violence, positive and healthy relationships. We were able to force the government to give us the facilitator's handbook, the one that's not public. They called us up and they said, no, you're not to release this to the public. And we got lawyer advice. They said, no, get stuff. You got it under an OIA, therefore you can use it. So we did. We put in a 4-part series, and we even, to make sure that we weren't trying to fool anyone, we released the actual facilitator's handbook online so people could make up their minds. And what we found within it was that, yes, it actually is a whole bunch of scenarios and procedures, because it almost never talks about fat kids, thin kids, white kids, black kids, rich, poor, whatever. It very much focuses around LGBTQIA plus kids, and very much pushing that sort of agenda, and also encouraging you to choose which whether you are a boy or a girl or anything in between, and to change it on a daily basis. And so we put that out there online. And what was really great is that over the last year, I think we've seen over 6 schools stop the Mates and Dates program because the parents got wind of it, and they took the information that we gave them and they went to the school and said, hey, are you running this program? Yes, we are. Okay, we don't like it. And then what's happened is that the schools have made a survey to the parents saying, do you want Mates and Dates? Those schools have now stopped Mates and Dates program. And that's a wonderful, wonderful thing, because now they've put in something that's a lot more age-developed, age-related, scientific, and more appropriate for what they need to do. The problem is that Mates and Dates, you fund it. You fund it. Therefore, if you're a school, do we take this anti-bullying, anti-sexual violence program that ACC sees as all good, and then don't have to worry about my operational budget? Or do I have to go to this other program that will cost money, and then I've got to figure out how I'm going to pay for some more services later down the road? And that's where the problem is. So often the taxpayer funded, that will take nothing away from the operational budget, and on a public looks good, they'll take it. And so we were very proud of that particular one. We thought that was the gender ideology, but we were wrong. The one that got released 2.5 weeks ago, that's the one that is more pure and more invasive and very much insidious.
And what are they doing with that one that they've just released? What's happening with that?
So the one that they've just released, so Mates and Dates was one sexual health component through the program from years 9 to 13. The one from 2.5 years ago has actually says to embed gender ideology into your lesson plans across the board. So if you're going to do creative writing, they could use, hey, okay, put yourself in the place of a young transgender 13-year-old and then engage in this way. In fact, we've released a couple of scenarios given it, and they're quite horrific. It talks about having sex, not being attracted to your pregnant girlfriend, but on the other side, you look at a guy and you think he's really hot. You guys don't have sex that often. And so it really twists. The scenarios are really twisting in terms of a young mind, even to an adult mind. A lot of these are actually quite twisting. And not only have they pushed it out to high school, now they've also put it out to primary school. And I'm more than happy to send you the links to the Ministry of Education documents. And what it will show is that there are outcomes for each level or years. So it goes 5 to 6 6-year-olds are to be taught the difference between gender and sex, and then from 7 to 8, it's to add to that sexual orientations and how people view sex and love and lust in different scenarios. And then I think it's 9 and 10-year-olds, how you can be an ally and how you can engage in different programs around it. It is incredible, the blatant ideologizing of our children. It's quite incredible, the level of it and the blatant elements of it. This is the stuff that is the scary stuff. The Mates and Dates program is nothing compared to what just got released.
So when you say it just got released, does that mean it's being infiltrated into schools now as a part of their program?
Yes. So Tracy Martin released it, and that's the one that's been sent to all the schools. It'll be sent to all schools now, and it will be part of their development requirements that they engage in it, so that they've got strands and level outcomes.
Wow. And that starts, when does that start? Is that now?
Well, theoretically, as it goes out. So in the next development meetings, they've got to incorporate this into their teaching practice.
And so that's nothing that parents get a say in. This is just has to be incorporated. It's a part of the NZQA or whatever it's called.
Because it's just a part of the normal lesson planning. But what I'll do, if you'd like, I'll actually send them to you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Because that's what we believe. We believe that we don't want to just expose this stuff by telling you. We expose. We say what's in there, and then we give it to everyone to make up their own mind on.
Yeah. I love these answers. They're so very interesting. I'm just having a look for another question. Karen, what are your policies around euthanasia?
We absolutely oppose euthanasia. And the main reason for myself, for my own personal self, I've worked in suicidal ideation, obviously, for a while. And I've also spoken to young people while they've been in the act of suicidal activity. Now, how on earth do I say to a young person, your life is valuable, you are precious, you are important to this life and to this nation, you're absolutely important. And then over here I'm saying, well, if you feel like your life is a bit over and you're a bit sick, then yep, off yourself and no problem. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And what these laws, the abortion law, the euthanasia law, what they're really pushing is the idea that life is not objectively sacred or important or valuable, but that it is subjectively important. We believe that no, life is important, whether or not you believe so, whether you're depressed or got bipolar, or if you are sick, or if you're old, or if you are going through a hard time. Because as conservatives, we understand that at different points of our life, all of our lives, we're going to be strong and we're going to be weak, and we're going to be in the lowest doldrums and at the highest highs. We are going to have it all, and that's why a conservative society is one that protects the weak mostly. Those who seek to promote euthanasia advocate for the strong. I respect that, but they only advocate for the strong. What we have seen overseas is that those who are coerced, those who feel like they're a burden, those who are lonely, scared, afraid, and anxious and hopeless, they're the ones who kill themselves. This idea that it's pain related does not bear out in the science. And so what we say is, no, we will not support euthanasia because of leaks, and I probably spoke to most of them that I just did.
I think I've had a discussion with a journalist who wrote the book The Final Choice, and that's the euthanasia assisted suicide debate. And there were so many different scenarios where, you know, it all kind of ended up being, what happens if, you know, like we just say we pass the law and the bill as it is, as it's written right now, which isn't fantastic apparently, according to lots of lawyers. So what if we pass it in the state, its current state right now, and then, okay, so that it's this framework right now, but then, you know, isn't there always a little bit, you know, like people always push boundaries, don't they? Laws always get so pushed. So the state that it's in now isn't fantastic. What can it lead to? Like, what?
Yeah, a great question. And currently, if you get diagnosed, or if you have a referral point, you can get to 4 days and then kill yourself and not even tell any of your family. So that's the part that is sad. Also, unlike Oregon, and I think Oregon's bad law, but Oregon at least has it so that you say, right, 2 people have to be with you to sign off to say you were not coerced. New Zealand law, nah, that's not there. So the feelings of burden is a big one, because as parents, you feel like you want to just be there for your kids. You want to give them the best. And if that means that you've got to die so that your inheritance goes over to those kids, and so be it. And that's absolutely wrong. Mum left us in 2017, breast, and she was a proponent. She was a supporter of euthanasia until she looked up one day, and we were all together. We were doing one of those legacy tours, and she looked up. She saw her grandchildren and myself and my brother and our partners, and she realized that if she had taken her life, or the euthanasia option, she would have missed out on all of those times, those memories, not just for her to take with her, but also for us and also for our grandchildren. She passed on legacy gifts to each one of those grandchildren. She passed them on final words of wisdom, those elements of love. I stroked her hair. I was the one to sleep in the room with her body. Those are gorgeous, beautiful moments, even at a cultural level. I am Pacifica, Māori, and English, and the gift of being able to be there with Mum in her final times in a natural way was just lifelong sort of things. And so we say the trajectory is this, and this is where it gets quite scary. The trajectory leads to an area where it could actually end up being compulsory if you become a non-productive member of society. And that sounds absolutely dystopian, but we live in a world where we are seeing elements. There was a time where you would never have thought of euthanasia as a sort of a way that it happens. It sort of happens in a way now. They can they can use morphine to the point where they die from it. So it can sort of be done now. We didn't think abortion would be so heavy. We didn't think that the way private sector works, or that prostitution will be legalized. There are so many things that we never thought would actually occur that have occurred. The trajectory does move into a scary form where if you are of no more economic benefit to the society, then you will be moved along. And that's a horrific place to be.
That is a horrific even thought, but do you think that trying to see the best of everybody in this situation, do you think that their thought, you know, because we could bring in the UN ideology again on this one, I understand that, but do you think that has been sort of, it's being rolled out from a place of, you know, kind of like love and care for people, like let's release them from their pain, let's not let them have to go through pain? Or do you think it's more of a, you're a bit heavy on the numbers, you're old people, and you're you're cluttering up our DHB or whatever, you know, you're taking a lot of resources. Let's just give you this option, and then that helps us kind of unclutter as well. I don't know. That's my personal thoughts, and I might be being conspiratorial right now, but, you know, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's interesting because right now there's the Dutch lawmakers have just finished arguing so that 75-plus-year-olds can actually kill themselves without even being sick. So if they're healthy as a bull, nothing wrong with them, but they just feel like they've been having a full life, then they'll be off. Australia has just finished constructing their areas for what they call mature minors, so that 11, 12-year-olds can engage in killing themselves off by euthanasia, and their parents won't be able to have a say in it.
What?
So we see that it's actually expanding across the nations that have included it. So the explosion of it, what it's actually doing is moving life from being objectively high and precious to being subjectively high and precious. And that's something which is of incredible importance, is that we used to be a nation where we had objective. That means that no matter what I think of life, if I think of life, in the back of my head, I still know that this society actually does not want me to kill myself. But if you've got a person who thinks, well, actually, you know, I'm a dirtbag, I'm a scumbag, I'm worthless in this world, and in my head, I know that actually I can go down the road, fill out a quick form and get a pill or walk into a capsule and I'm smoked, then that changes the very dynamic of our acceptance of our world, our internal understandings of how we view the outside life, and it changes the very dynamic of our culture, of our historical culture, no matter whether you are from England or any culture. Every culture that we've had puts a high price on life. These laws take the high pressure or the high price away. And that's what's of the greatest import or the greatest concern.
There is just, like, more than I can really recall in all of my years, there is more at stake in this upcoming election than any that I can think of before. There's so much more going on, like we were just talking in the beginning, you know, the biblical proportions of what's happening. It's just all of everything all in one go. And I know there are a lot of people who are just like, again, you know, get with the times. It's just the way the world's going, so just get with it. But I guess just even in the name conservative, you know, you're bringing it back to a conservative view and conservative values and, like you said, life. So maybe you are, I guess, a unique in that you only suit the kind of people who want to stay conservative. But do you think that there are people who just don't really, you know, it's the whole, you don't know what you don't know. And if you're just cruising along with life and you're going with the flow and the world is changing and all that sort of thing, you don't realize until somebody puts a stake in the ground and says, hey, we want to stay conservative. You don't realize how far you've floated down the river. I don't know. I just think, like, do you think that people can still have going along with all these ideals that we've been talking about and then say, actually, no, that's not what I want. Listening to even this discussion, no, maybe I do want to come back and have a little bit more of the old-fashioned, you know, values. Do you think that that's what New Conservative is? It's about bringing it back to some kind of strong pillar?
Yeah, yes, as an outcome, yes. Probably our thought processes as a conservative, who we advocate for, what do we do? What is it about us that goes this way? And so I would look at, the people who say, hey man, you know, as an example, I wouldn't let my dog suffer and you're going to let your grandmother suffer. Wow, you're a scumbag. But actually, let's turn that around a little bit, because when we kill animals, for example, when we euthanize them, what we're saying is, hey man, you know, that animal's suffering, so let's end its suffering. But psychologically speaking, that's actually not what we're doing. What we're doing is when I take my dog and I love my dog and my dog's going in there and I give my dog an injection, I stroke his head and he goes away and I feel good about that. Make no mistake, it's designed to make me feel better, or the person doing the euthanizing feel better. It's not actually for the dog to do it in that regard. That's what it's about. When we look at the ideas and people who do support it, they are coming from a place of strength. And when you are strong, that's fine. You can have people who will advocate for you in times of strength. A conservative very much is aware that we are infallible and we are not perfect and we are broken people half the time, that we can choose good things and bad things, illegal and legal. And so the society that a conservative builds is one that says, right, life is important, family is important, and we know because that life is pain. We know that life is a struggle. We know that you are going to have good times and bad times. You're going to choose strength and weakness at different times of your life. So the society should always keep that in mind. It must protect the weak and protect the strong and protect, but very much protect things, not allow them. Conservatism protects the excesses of, restrains the excesses of government and restrains the excesses of the individual, so that there is at least this middle ground where people can operate and go up and down and left and right and good and bad and all that sort of stuff. That's the nature of a conservative. So when we do that, we expect to be called, by some people, we would expect to be called, you guys are wrong side of history. We expect to be called all of that because that is actually the idea. The idea is keep people as safe as possible, and within that, let them run around and go up and down and all over the place. It's why you'll find that most people who actually are in protecting suicidal people and trying to cling to them to cling on to life, they are naturally conservative. People who love families, naturally conservative. We advocate and we protect the weak. And that's what we're about.
If New Conservative was a person, it would be my nana, my very strong, strict Victorian nana. That's who New Conservative would be. And actually, even when she passed away, she was very strong, and she was losing her capabilities. She was very annoyed with that. She did not like that one little bit. She didn't like giving up driving. She didn't like her eyesight failing. She didn't like any of it. She didn't like her scribbly writing, all of that. But when she passed away, her daughter, my auntie, was able to sing like her favourite hymn to her, and she sang that to her. And then my nana got herself up, walked herself to the bathroom because her body was going, and then walked herself back to bed, and then she said, okay, I'm going now, and she passed away like that. Now that's a beautiful story and a beautiful ending. But but there are stories of people who have listened to their grandmother screaming all through the night when they've had a strong nana and had them crying and screaming all night because they're in such horrific pain. And those are the people who would maybe normally never have said, yes, let's just do this conservative, protecting them all the way through life and all that. It's those moments, it's those scenarios where people go, give them a choice, let them have a choice. So what would you say to that there?
I would say that you've actually got a form of that right now.
Yeah.
So when you do have, because you do have situations where you can actually have enough painkillers that actually it'll kill you, and you know that it'll kill you. So that can actually be already engaged with.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of what the word is. Not legalized, the other one, decriminalized. So we do actually already have a form of decriminalized euthanasia. That's one where you can actually accept it, or you can stop certain treatments. Or you can stop doing whatever. You can go home. You can over-medicate yourself on purpose. Those situations already occur. They're already here. To open it up to make suicide legal and funded by the taxpayer, and perverting healthcare to actually facilitate it is it's a diametric change of the very things that even the doctors took oaths against. There is an absolute reason as to why doctors are over nearly 100% opposed to it. Every time they take a poll, every time they do submissions, every time they check with the different industries across the board, the doctors overwhelmingly reject euthanasia because it goes against the very reasons as why they exist as doctors at all. I think that's actually what one of the big part of it is. So it already happens. You can, and if someone really wants to kill themselves, they can kill themselves.
We just don't want to make it so much a liberty involved around it, and just give them.
And because if you look overseas, it's already blowing up all over the place.
Wow. Okay, let's see if we've got some more questions. Is it possible to get the minor parties to form a viable coalition? Good question.
we've had a few meetings. So
Yeah.
yeah, so us ODP, Advance, what was the NZPP, yeah, a couple of others did meet up. I like the ODP. I think they're pretty cool. There were some issues, some red flags around some of the others. Yeah.
No good question that you can't answer. Yeah.
Oh no. You know what? I said I'd be straight up. I said I'd be straight up, so I'll be straight up. The issue that we have with Advanced / NZPP is one thing that they don't like our Israel policy. We're quite pro-Israel. We think that Israel should be able to defend itself. We believe that we should have closer links because they have a comparable agricultural sector and they're off the hook when it comes to. They're a desert that became a beautiful flowering greenery. So we do like Israel. They don't. Advanced / NZPP are. I wouldn't say they're anti-Israel, but they don't like quite a bit about Israel. The other part is treaty policy. They think that separatism is sort of okay. The third one is abortion. We're not exactly sure what their abortion policy is. We are quite pro-life. We're pro-life. We believe that babies. We believe in the heartbeat bill, and we think that the most brutal abortion bill ever constructed in Western culture that we now have is absolutely wrong. The other one, probably the big outlier though, is, and I mean no offense to him whatsoever, but we will not work with Jamie Lee Ross. No offense to him whatsoever, but the issues around fraud, sexual issues regarding from both his admitted stuff as well as what he may be going through quite soon is not. We just don't want to have a bar of that, and that's no personal disrespect to him. It's just that we've got certain values. Colin Gray, when he did what he did in 2014, there was no way he was going to survive it. He got slipped from 2015. So yeah, we respect them, but no, that won't happen.
Yeah, it doesn't really align with your conservative values, and obviously you need to keep that squeaky clean, otherwise you're not who you are. Okay, what have we got here? Would you repeal the COVID law that was pushed through at level 4?
Yes.
That's easy.
Easy one, that one. I will say this: you said squeaky clean. I also want to point out that, man, I'm as bad as anyone else. 25 years ago, I coerced my girlfriend at the time to have an abortion, and it's something that I think about most days. And also, over the last 15 years, twice I have engaged in what the abortion laws in New Zealand actually allow. So twice I've taken 2 different 14-year-olds off to the abortion clinic and back on the same day. And the parents, the family, have no idea. And under the current law, that's absolutely fine. And we would actually scrap that law because that's a disgusting law as well. So yeah, it's just something which I often say, man, I'm as dirty as anyone. And in fact, perhaps some of what I did in my past actually is the reason why I fight in the way that I fight now.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. Everybody's got a past, every single one of us, and you can either grow from it and get better, or I mean, it's up to you. You can either go one way or the other. So, and usually the people who have had the hardest past, when they actually do fight through it, they become some of the most brilliant and amazing people, and would probably never have got there if it wasn't for that adversity. And I feel like that's my own life story as well. Yep. Let's just quickly. I know we've been talking for a long time, but because you would know the actual facts around this, the Abortion Act, because we've had this argument even on when we talked about New Conservative and your values and policies, the Abortion Act, as I believe it, before they made it so liberal, it was that you could have an abortion up until 20 weeks if you had a disabled baby or a sick baby, or was that just any baby up until 20 weeks?
You mean before the current bill?
Current bill, yeah.
Yeah, up until 20 weeks, you had to go through a questionnaire sheet and a discussion period, but effectively, yep, for anything generally, yep.
Yeah.
By outcome.
And so, would you or would you not have thought that would have covered, all different reasons to have an abortion? you know, being 20 weeks is quite a long period of time to be pregnant, and you usually would find out by then whether you had a disabled baby, you know, what they're aborting for at the moment, cleft palate, club foot, all of those kinds of things.
I think about those cleft. I think about the babies killed off because they had a cleft lip, and I think, wow, man,
Yeah.
you had a child there who could have been beautiful, and just, you know, just because they
Yeah.
had a cleft lip, that actually just requires a bit of a surgical sewing needle, and yeah. I think that the previous law was actually the previous law, I believe, was okay. The issue was the application of the safety procedures around it. That was the main issue. You could just go in and say, having this baby is a danger to my mental health, and it is going to ruin I'm going to go depressed, and then they could just kill the baby.
Yeah.
The ASC, the committee responses, had it that, so usually I hear the response saying, "Oh man, what about rape babies? What about rape babies?" Now, firstly, generally I say, okay, well, let's take rape babies. Let's say you can kill the babies who are conceived by rape. Does that mean the rest of them are really bad as well? And then, of course, they generally say, no, no. So what are you putting up rape babies for then?
Mm.
So rapes occur so illegal conception through illegal means, which is rape, incest, and the like. They usually count for about 3 or 4 abortions out of the 13,000 odd abortions that occur. So that's 0.02%, I think it is. But the vast, vast majority of the rest of the abortions are due to inconvenience. Whether they hooked up on nights and then they didn't know until they got pregnant, or they just broke up with the boyfriend or husband or whatever, and they want to, no, not having this baby, you know, anything like that. So that's the vast, vast majority of all babies being killed off is due to that. And that's incredibly dangerous. So yeah, in the current bill, of course, you know, you just need health practitioners. No longer is it doctors. You just need to have 2 health practitioners sign off on it, who could actually be abortion clinic staff. In actual fact, you're no longer a human being until you're pulled from the mum's womb alive entirely. So that means you can have the placenta and the umbilical cord, but if every other part of the baby's out, only then are you considered a human being under New Zealand law. Now that is a dramatic change, because of course, you know, when you're a mum and you've got baby kicking away, and I don't know what it's like, but I've heard the heartbeat. I've had pressed my cheek towards the baby, and you know what? Even if that baby's unwanted, and the baby is going to be born into a poor home, so what? There's a chance there that baby can come out. And hey, Ben Carson, the world's greatest neurosurgeon, born poor, born into deep poverty, no dad, and he was able to come up. How many cancer treatment makers? How many artists? How many human beings have we lost just because they happen to be inconvenient, or because they were hooked up on a one night stand or something? So yeah, I think the new abortion bill is incredibly brutal. In fact, I think my most horrific part of it is that the same politicians who managed to push it also managed to stop the idea of painkillers being given to babies born in late term abortions. So not just the one where they have a needle plunged into their heart to poison the heart, but even the vivisection and the dismemberment one, where the pieces of the body are torn apart, the skull is crushed, and the amniotic fluid is sucked out, and then the pieces of the skull are removed. And the politicians were able to block painkillers being given to those babies. And the quality research says that babies feel pain from 20 weeks, around 20 weeks. And so a baby in that position will. Now here's a more disturbing one. I spoke to a previous abortionist about 2 nights ago, and he said that when he would put the suction in, or when he would put the tongs in, the baby squirmed away from the suction and away from the metal tongs. Don't tell me that they don't feel pain. They absolutely feel pain, and to destroy our own species like this is, I mean, you generally don't even see it in the animal kingdom. We seem to be the ones who do this. So So yeah, I mean, it's incredibly brutal, and isn't it? And that's why I look upon Labour's stance of we're a kind government with absolute contempt, as well as National. If National had, as a party, said, "Nah, we're not going to vote for this horrific bill," then there wouldn't be this horrific bill. But many of them fought hard for it, and it's a disgraceful attack on humanity itself.
Oh, it's a really nasty and really very delicate subject, and especially I know because my group are all women, and I guess they would have the majority would be it's my body, it's my choice. So I think bringing that into it as well, I guess I don't know, it's just really hard for me to imagine even a baby when they're about 4 months, when you're 4 months pregnant and they're still a whole fully formed baby. It's kind of hard for me to get my head around it, but then I don't know, I'm not in anybody else's head and I don't know how people think about it. I don't know, I definitely am, that did definitely concern me, that bill, and I think it's very liberal. It's the most liberal in the world, isn't it, that abortion? Yeah.
Ireland used to be, now we've got it.
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's so much to unpack. Okay, so why is agenda this is an interesting one. Why is agenda 21 and 30 a threat, and why are they detrimental to New Zealand?
So basically, the very gist of it is, under those agenda items and a few others under the UN agenda is, everyone will have a nice job, everyone will have enough to eat, everyone will basically go around campfires and sing kumbaya, and we will all love each other and be happy dappy and all that sort of stuff. That's effectively what the agenda items actually cover. The problem is, what you're talking about is equality of outcome, and equality of outcome effectively takes away human nature. It removes human nature from it. So, like I said before, with the benefits, and what it's done is it's taken away, resilience and tenacity and innovation and all that sort of good stuff. Equality of outcome basically means to take everything and then divvy it all out. It's not a word I utilize too often, but you're looking at, it's socialism. That's what it is. It's the idea of just partitioning out for everyone. Everyone works and they contribute to society, and it all goes into one pot, and then a particular group give it out, and then you can have it all. The problem is it doesn't work. Like it is demonstrably, historically, it's never worked. In actual fact, what it's led to is, over the last century, a Harvard researcher looked it up. It's killed about 100 million men, women, and children. 100 million.
Wow.
In fact, it is the most lethal type of ideology that you can find in the world.
Yeah.
So the United Nations is seeking to do this. You have to remember that this United Nations itself is a multinational, taxpayer-funded organizations. They don't make their own money. All the countries give taxpayer funds to this one organization, and that's the organization that's built. So the United Nations is the most powerful organization, but it's also quite humorous because it's actually built off the taxes of the world. So it makes absolute sense as to why they would engage in charters and agendas that actually say that the whole world should be a nice socialist place, a utopia where everyone gets what they want or what they need, and then they can just sing songs all day long. But it doesn't work like that, because anytime socialism has never worked in the history of mankind, never. You look at Afghanistan, you look at Cuba, of course, China and USSR, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, Angola. You look at anywhere where they've tried it, it's either killed so many of the host population, or they shut it down and they've only been hurt economically speaking. So socialism doesn't work. It kills more than anyone else, more than any other war, more than any other ideology. And in fact, I've had this debate with a couple of academics, and they were saying, "Oh no, man, Christianity and Islam has killed more people." And I said, "Well, look, I'm not a fan of Islam, I'll give you that, but Islam and Christianity combined hasn't even come close to the death rate of communism. The reason why, communism says socialism, but the problem is that no one cares because it's in the host country. So those outside the country don't see it too much."
So tell me how it's killing people exactly.
Right. So in terms of how it sort of works and operates, is that it takes all of the resources takes resources from a country, puts it all into one, and then it divvies it out. But what happens is in some areas, so let's take China. China is probably a good example, or more an easier example. China, you had all the thing, and so you had the farmers, and they had to give lots of wheat and grain and all that sort of stuff to the central location. The central location took what they want, they divvied it out. But the problem was, of course, was that it was never enough. Productivity went down, because whenever you're delivering just the same amount to everyone, productivity always diminishes. Productivity always goes down. And so they didn't have enough. So they only gave to who they wanted to. And then you had scores, just tens of thousands of people just dying from starvation, because that's unfortunately the sort of way it works. Whenever you engage in socialism, productivity drops. The reason why I love capitalism is not because you've got horrible parts of that where you get crony capitalism and stuff like that. But what it means is that I've got a wax candle. And if I make enough of these wax candles, people will give me good amounts of money for it. With that amount of money, I can buy my children a nice bike. I can get a nice house. I can, by the effort and the work of my hands, I can get people to give me money for what I make. And then I can actually go up and choose how I live. And I can seek my own adventures. It goes to the very nature of what it means to be a human being and to how we operate. That's why it works. Whenever you engage in socialism, it can never work, because it takes away the very human nature that is required to power it. Socialism or Marxism is a theory. Capitalism is a reaction to world events. It's a reaction to mercantile systems, bartering. I got some bling bling, you got some bling bling, or I will do this sort of labor for you if you give me this amount of money. That's sort of, so capitalism has been a real world reaction to a whole bunch of events. That's why it works, because it works because it always worked. The UN is probably the most insidious, dangerous place at all, and it's worse because they are the literal version of the phrase or the proverb, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah, that's very poignant, actually. Okay, so in the leaders' debate yesterday, I did actually just catch Miss Judith say something like, that's because they're not into communism or something like that, with the meat and dairy farming or something. I can't remember exactly. But she just pointed out that she's taking notes that Labour are pushing a socialist agenda. And obviously, as we know, socialism can then turn to communism. What are your thoughts on that?
I think in terms of Judith, from what I'm aware, I have heard her PR team have started counselling her to change the format. So my understanding is that when she took over, she was trying to be the nice and gentle one, trying to be the same as Jacinda Ardern. And then when that wasn't working, I think they tried to get her to, embrace the crusher, the reputation of the crusher. And so then she became a lot stronger in her speeches and the, all of that sort of stuff.
She appears to be enjoying immensely. She seems to be enjoying that immensely.
Oh yeah, man, that's where she belongs. She should never have had the other stuff. She's great at her comebacks. She's really onto it. I used to be a bit of a fan of, I started being a fan of Labour until I realised that they brought out the dawn rates. Then I was a bit of a fan of a National, but then I realised that they're actually just a slower form of Labour. And one of the things I give them is they've gone quite socially liberal. No, they've gone very socially liberal, but they've also gone to the left a bit as well, even economically, because the zero carbon bill, for example, is a great example of a left-wing policy. It'll cost us $5 trillion, according to Bjorn Lomborg, and he wrote in the New York Post. And it will actually not just devastate, it'll devastate our community, our nation, and it'll also lead to lots of deaths, because our social healthcare system, which is already struggling, will not be able to catch up with a $5 trillion loss to our economy. It just doesn't work that way. So unfortunately, National have to sort of follow along. I think that, so I think Judith Collins has realized that they've sort of lost a few of their people. For example, firearms community, gone. Farmers, gone. People who used to think that right-wing, that National Party were right-wing for economics, sort of there, sort of still there. And of course, they've got their loyal base, which is, usually around about the low 20%. the other ones who'll be like Labour, they'll vote. Doesn't matter whether National start holding anti-Christian or devil worship sort of ceremonies, they'll just vote National. And that's sort of normal for any sort of party. You'll have that real core base. But yeah, so effectively, I think Judith has finally cottoned on to. So she's trying to probably just shore up her original base so that they don't have a spectacularly bad election. Yeah. So and that's sort of to be expected, I suppose. Yeah.
So speaking of the election, and I know you guys are polling quite well, or you're increasing in the polling, which is quite good, although we never blooming well know what the polling's really going to be like until the end, but I can see you're increasing. What are your predictions for the election?
I believe we'll get in. I believe we'll get in about 10-ish%, and we'll win 1 or 2 electorates. Now, of course, that's just. I'm trying to be realist, though. I'm trying not to be pessimistic or optimistic. I'm trying to get as realism as I can do. We have New Conservative, as I mentioned, 70% of us are small and medium business owners. We are only one of two. Sorry, we're the only one of 2 parties who has a person in every single seat, including the Māori seats. So we have a person in every single seat, and only Labour and National have that. When it comes to online data, and we think about Cambridge Analytica in the 2016 US election, where all the pollsters got it wrong to the days, what we have found is that we're in a similar environment to that, not Australia or the UK last year. And over the last 26 months, if you added up all of the scores, the 3 most trafficked and most positive parties for online engagement happen to be National, Labour, and New Conservative.
Wow.
We blast every single other party through the roof. Now that's added up all the scores over the last 26 months, I think it is. Mm-hmm. So we are boosting it. What are our support? So I don't expect the polls to give us much love at all. And the reason being is that our support has always been deeply grassroots. That's why we have so many teams on the ground. We still get called out with, release your financial tax records, release your financial records. We know you're getting heaps of money. The 3 groups that people think that we're getting heaps of money from, our opponents, say is NRA, Old Jewish Money, and Exclusive Brethren. Those are the 3 parties that they keep bringing up, and they're trying to force us to release our financial records. And I've told the team, no, let them think that, that's fine. But I'll tell you where it comes from. It comes from just hundreds of families just giving $10, $20, $30 a week, and then there's a few people who are giving some nice, beautiful donations on top of that. But so I'm full time with the party. I don't get paid by some massive fat donation paycheck. I get paid from men and women and small families and individuals just giving a bit of money every single week. And that, I think, is worth so much more money than what they're actually giving, because they see it, they're grassroots, they're not wanting to engage with other people. They just want to see our nation become free and go back to being a place of values, of morality, of looking after small business, of farmers, to the times even when we didn't have to lock our doors all the time. So, we're real proud of that.
And honestly, such a great conversation. I could just carry on talking for blooming ages. Let's just have a quick little look at these questions. I think we have covered everything. My last question to you was, do you think that MPs should work on a commission-based salary, actually be doing the work and then getting paid? So have their little purse, have their bit of money, and then be paid based on what they're giving to their communities. Do you think that should be a thing?
I've never thought about that, but I can tell you what our policy is. So we have a policy about MP salaries. We believe that MP salaries should be attached to the general wage growth or decrease in New Zealand wages. So if the New Zealand wages go up, the MP's wages should go up. If our wages go down, the MP's wages should go down. That's what we believe. Therefore, there is an invested desire to make sure that wages go up. I will say this also. This is something that's actually from our economic policy, something that I've looked at. We can't. It's probably unrelated, but it's still related at the same time. the government keeps on trying to push for minimum wage growth and living wage growth as well. That's incredibly bad. That's really, really bad, because what you're doing is when we increase minimum wage. Now, I work in the hood. I've lived in the hood. I grew up in the hood, and I've worked in the hood. And so when you have minimum wage increases, what you do is you lose job creators. And when we do that, we actually become, so as an example, the warehouse, for example, because it's an institute that I know, what you'll find is that full-timers will go to part-timers, and part-timers will go to casuals. And so you've got a massive pool of casuals who don't know how many hours they're going to get on the next shift timetable coming up. And it's like, it's incredible. It's like, no, fix our economy. Stop pumping up all of these minimum wage things, because it doesn't actually help us. It hurts us. We've got to allow our economy to grow and to allow the private sector. The way we get out of COVID, private sector, small businesses, and letting people keep more of their money. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, that's good. So Judith actually did say in the leaders' debate that she thought that everybody should have a $3,000 cash injection and go out and spend it and bump up the economy. And then obviously Jacinda said something about that was just a little sugar pill or something like that. And so obviously they have so are you sort of erring more on Judith's side of that argument, or do you think even that's a little bit?
Actually, let me tell you something. So our economic policy says first 20,000 tax free, and then raise up the tax bracket slightly for every tax rate after that. We released that policy 2.5 months ago.
Oh, wow.
National 2 weeks ago
nicked it.
Hey, we should make $13,000 tax free, and then we should raise the tax brackets up a bit. And all of us were like, dude, are you serious? Did you seriously? So we had a bit of a crack up about it, and we thought, hey, sincerest form of flattery, no problem, that's all good. We have spotted a few of our policies suddenly being taken up by other parties, and we thought, hey, you know what's cool? Hey, we know what we're talking about.
Property tax is it? Yeah, what is it? Imitation, sincere form of flattery. And I guess that's why some of those parties hold their policies so tightly to their chest right up until the last minute, and you think, well, come on, just tell us what you're good for. And you don't find out until the last minute, and then that's kind of like a sugar pill as well, because it's right before the elections. You find out all the good stuff and you vote based on that. Anyway, very interesting discussion. I just did not think I had a politician in me, but clearly I have. Tomorrow we're interviewing the Outdoors Party, so you said you had a bit of an alignment with that.
Yeah.
So that'll be another interesting chat. But oh man, thanks so much for your time. I hope that we've been able to clear up some of the topics and issues that some of the women on the page have had. It's certainly cleared up heaps of well, not issues, but it's cleared heaps of things up for me, giving me lots of clarity. And so best of luck with the election, and best of luck for everything going forward. And thank you so much, Elliot Ikilei. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. See you later.
Bye-bye.